Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is Sunday, February the 3rd, 2018. This is TowerGate 332. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, today we're going to talk about some more things, more thoughts on the FISA Memo release, and also where we go from here and what we can expect in the upcoming week. It's going to be quite a turbulent week, to say in the least. So I've got some things I've been thinking about, because yesterday, right after the memo came out, I read it. Took about an hour or two to create some notes and things, and I went through that yesterday, really just going kind of like bullet points through the FISA memo to just give my thoughts, my sort of quick reaction thoughts to what was in the memo as the memo was laid out. So that's kind of what I did yesterday, mainly just off the top of my head going through that. But now that I've had about 24, 36 hours to sit and digest a lot of it, and so I've come up with some other thoughts, and I have some questions, some other things I want to talk about, but we're primarily going to be focused on things still associated with the release of the FISA memo today, because it's going to be the talk certainly on all of tomorrow's Sunday shows. Probably a lot more people interested in that than they are in the Super Bowl. And this upcoming week there's going to be a lot as well. So, and it's just going to continue now. As I said, this was really the launch of the beginning of the investigation, and from this point forward it's going to continue to build and build and build on both sides, because on the other side there is so much at stake and so much to lose that this is why they're going to go with the scorched earth policy, because there will be nothing left of the Democratic Party, the rotten reverend. Unfortunately, the leadership of the DOJ and the FBI, possibly the State Department, the Obama legacy, there is so much at stake. If we get to the bottom of this and find that what most of us believe to be true is true, it's going to be absolutely devastating. Probably the biggest political scandal in American history by a mile. So let's go through some things here. First of all, there's two items that have popped up in the last 24 hours or so that I want to talk about before we move on to kind of the past things. But we learned today from an article in the Washington Times that of all these warrants, and not all of these warrants were actual FISA warrants for spying on foreign citizens. The first few warrants that were taken out were standard level 1 type warrants, you know, that you would get on anyone inside the United States. They weren't done through the FISA court. They were just standard warrants. So we had a total of 7 warrants. Quite a few of these warrants were just to continue, because they get like a time period for each search warrant. They get or surveillance warrant, they get like 30 or 60 or 90 days, and so they went for these extensions. So a lot of these warrants that we're talking about, and the ones that turned into FISA warrants, were extensions on previous warrants, which brought the total of original and extension warrants to about 7 that we know of. And so we're learning from a story written today in the Washington Examiner that on all 7 of these FISA warrants and the regular level 1 warrants that were requested, and most were granted, the first one was not, the rest were, but on every one of them, Loretta Lynch was a signature to every one of these warrants. Loretta Lynch was a signature to all of the warrants, including the first one that was rejected. And all the follow-up warrants, the level 1 warrant, as well as the FISA warrant, and the ones that were used to continue the surveillance that were based on a previous warrant. So that's a very interesting point. And of course, Loretta Lynch is going to have a lot of questions to answer. She is very much a central figure in all of this. Well, we have 2 new polls out in the last 24 hours, and I'm not sure when these polls were taken, but we know that the release of these polls occurred in the last 24 to 36 hours. And these polls now, 2 polls, have Trump at, one has him at 49%, That would be the Real Clear Politics poll, and we have the Rasmussen poll, which has Trump at 51%. So once you crack 50%, that is very, very good. Very, very good. It's really hard for a president, especially in a tumultuous environment like we exist in, to reach 50% approval. Even Obama or Clinton or Bush or whatever, during times when they were riding high in the polls, were typically somewhere around 47, 46, 48, something like that. But it's kind of hard to crack 50% in this country, especially with the political nature of things. But Trump is now at 49 and 51 in two different polls. That is very, very strong, and it's a very good sign, because if you're Mueller, the executioner, and you were brought in to take out Trump, it's very, very difficult to try to make a move like that when the president has got this high of approval rating. This means that he is gaining supporters. He is gaining supporters. He is gaining strength. He's getting stronger. Therefore, the other side is getting weaker. And it's very, very hard for a prosecutor to go after a guy with approval ratings that high. He would have to have some actual, really hard evidence. And he has none of anything. Now, let's just go through some thoughts here about what is going to be the fallout from the FISA memo. Obviously, tomorrow on the Sunday morning programs, it'll be what we've been seeing. It'll be a bunch of really partisan back and forth between the two, with Democrats out telling lots of lies, which is what they have been doing, telling lies such as that they never looked at the actual FISA applications when they did this report. That's a lie. Trey Gowdy was selected as the person to go look at the applications because of his experience in the justice system, the Department of Justice, for over 10 years, because they were only allowed to have one person from the committee and then two investigative lawyers who are cleared. And so Nunes said, well, if it's between me and you, Trey, you should do it because you were in the Justice Department for 10 years. You know what type of things should be in a statement for a warrant on the application. You know what those applications should look like and that type of thing, so you should go do it. So Trey Gowdy did review the FISA application warrants, and he had two witnesses, which were two federal investigators working on the Senate Intelligence and Oversight Committees. The fact that Devin Nunes personally didn't see it, he said that Gowdy was able to make notes, and then they came back and reviewed the notes. So the idea that the Democrats are saying that there was nobody even looked at the underlying evidence is a lie. They're also making the lie that Devin Nunes and his team were working or coordinating somehow with the president or with his team as they were going through the process of creating this FISA memo. This is false. Nunes has been interviewed several times. He said absolutely false. They never worked in any way, shape, or form with anyone, with the president or anyone on his team. This was all done internally through the Senate Intelligence Committee. So these are just a couple of the big lies that they're out there pushing. But there'll be more of that on the Sunday morning programs, you can bet. But ultimately, the propaganda is not going to stick to anything. Only the true facts will remain. And when we get to the really important part of this, which is when all these things are brought in front of a federal grand jury with a prosecutor, that's when we will separate fact from fiction. And the Democrats know this. It's all PR for them at this point. They're hoping they can drag it through and survive until 2018, where they somehow believe that they're going to win back the Congress and then hold impeachment hearings. That's the game plan for the Democrats. Try to drag this thing out and delay it until 2018, where they think they're going to win back the Congress and then have impeachment hearings. That's their plan. It's not going to work, not even close. In fact, they're going to get their asses kicked in 2018, I can assure you that. But looking at the week ahead, what's going to happen besides a lot of the propaganda on both sides, what we're going to see this week is that all eyes are going to be now turning towards Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, and Rodenstein. All eyes are going to turn to these two guys. Obviously, we can see that Rodenstein went to the FISA court. He was one of the people who signed off on one of these FISA warrants where they went to the FISA court, did not inform the judge in the FISA court anything about the Orrs, and that information came from Nellie Orr, which was given to her husband, which was passed along to Peter Benstrokinus, most likely a high-level counterintelligence official, we can assume was Peter Benstrokinus, and also the information that came from the Steele dossier. None of this, or the fact that it was paid for by the Clinton campaign, none of this was disclosed by Rodenstein to the FISA court. What we should see this week is Rodenstein resigning. And what we really should see is Rodenstein being arrested or charged. But at the very least, we should see Rodenstein either A, resign, or B, fired by Jeff Sessions or the president. Clearly, he went to the FISA court and he lied on the FISA application to get the warrant. That's what happened. It's very simple. Rosenstein should not survive the week. We will also be watching Jeff Sessions very closely, who, as we know, recused himself. Once he did so, he essentially made Rod Rosenstein, Rodenstein, essentially is now the guy in charge of anything having anything to do with Russia, the Russian investigation, the dossier, anything at all connected to that. Sessions essentially put Rodenstein in charge of that. He's now obviously compromised. He was a part of the plot, and he committed a crime in the process of participating in the plot. Sessions should now step forward and fire him if he doesn't resign. Sessions will also be under a tremendous amount of pressure as the week moves forward to appoint the special prosecutor. He's been asked to do so many times over the past several weeks and months. He has not done that. But now, based on the release of the FISA memo and what we have learned, there should be absolutely no question in Jeff Sessions' mind about whether or not you need a special counsel to deal specifically with what happened in the surveillance, the FISA process, and everything else surrounding it with the dossier, the involvement of the State Department, the Justice Department, the FBI, the Clinton team, and all of this. There should be a specific prosecutor brought in to focus on that. And that's what Jeff Sessions should do this week. And there'll be a lot of pressure on him to do that. And if it doesn't happen this week with this memo, maybe it will happen with the next or the next, because they'll keep coming. At some point, Sessions is going to have to step up and do his job. But I expect that of Sessions, after this week, if we go through the full week and by Friday Sessions hasn't fired Rodenstein or forced him to resign and hasn't appointed a special counsel to specifically look at this based on what we learned from the FISA memo, then I think that the following week, the loudest calls you're going to hear from all across the country, from, people, I would say Republicans, Libertarians, people watching this, not the Democrats obviously, but everyone else, it will be calling for Sessions himself to resign, which he should. Absolutely, it will go beyond incompetence. There'll be something wrong. There'll have to be, as many of you have made, Johnny Five Finger just recently made a comment in the comment section, Sessions must be compromised. And it's the only logical conclusion. I've had that comment by many of you over the past months. And I keep saying, yeah, it's possible. I don't think so, though. He seems pretty clean. I don't really think he's a dirty player or anything like that. But now I'm actually having to step across that line and join many of you and come to the conclusion that, I think many of you may have been correct. There may be something there that I don't know about. Sessions may, in fact, be compromised in some way. I don't know what that would be. Maybe some of you have some ideas. But, he may be compromised because I cannot imagine that by the end of this week, Sessions will not be under tremendous pressure, and he should. It shouldn't take any more pressure. His reading of that memo, and he should have known everything in that memo anyway. But After this week, there should be no doubt in Sessions' mind that there must be a special counsel appointed to look specifically at these things that we just discussed. And I think most eyes will be watching Sessions and Rodenstein this week. We're going to learn a lot about how this thing is going to go, what direction it's going to go, and how fast it's going to move based on what happens with Rodenstein and Sessions, the eager beaver, the overachiever, Jeff Sessions, this week. We'll watch very closely. Rosenstein, prior to resigning or being forced to resign or being fired, should end the Mueller probe. It's clear from what we see that the entire Trump-Russia collusion story was a scam. It was a political opposition hit piece that was supposed to be the October surprise to defang Trump, to cut his legs out from under him and deliver the election to Hillary Clinton. That's what this was. It's becoming quite evident. Mueller's probe is based on a fraud, and it should be ended. There'll be a lot of people calling for that this week. We will see what Mueller does. We know he has suspended the sentencing for Michael Flynn. I would not be surprised at all to see Michael Flynn's attorneys, if he's got the money to do it, to countersue Mueller based on what we learned in the FISA Memo. Mueller needs to be gone by the end of this week, along with Rodenstein. And Rodenstein is the only one who can do that. Well, Trump could do it, but that wouldn't be politically wise. It's really up to Rodenstein at this point. Prior to him resigning himself, because of the fact that he's in criminal liability and criminal jeopardy and will likely go to jail when this thing pans itself out, Rodenstein needs to end the Mueller probe. Sessions cannot. He recused himself. Now, maybe he can unrecuse himself, but I haven't heard anyone say that that's what would happen. So that's what needs to occur in the next week to come. In the previous video, I said Comey is going to jail. Oh, Lordy. Why did I say that? Very, very simple. Comey testified under oath in the Congress and said the dossier was unverified and salacious. Then he went on 3 different occasions and used it as a sworn statement to get a FISA warrant. My friends, that's as criminal as you can get. That's lying to the FISA court, or lying to the Congress, one of the two. But we know he was lying to the FISA court. You see, when you sign off on that warrant to the FISA court, it's essentially taking the oath. It's like sitting in front of a jury and a judge and taking an oath, swearing to tell the truth, all truth, and nothing but the truth. It's essentially the same thing. You are essentially testifying under oath that the evidence that you're presenting to get the warrant is true. That's what Comey signed on the FISA application. That's what that FISA application is. It's a legally binding document. It's a statement of oath, that you're taking an oath that the following is true. We now know it wasn't true, and that he knew it wasn't true. That's why Comey is going to jail. Now, there are a lot of people who are saying that Mueller gave Comey some sort of immunity at some point to be a witness. I don't know. I've not heard that confirmed. I hear it talked about a lot, but I've never heard that confirmed. We are going to find out if Mueller gave Comey some sort of immunity. We'll find out what that immunity is and what it covers. But just because Mueller gave Comey immunity doesn't mean that he can go in and lie on the FISA application. You cannot give someone immunity to go lie on the FISA application and then say, yeah, well, down the road if you get caught for lying on the FISA application, you're going to be immune from that. Nah, that's not going to fly. That will not fly, and no way. Devin Nunes appeared on the Fox News Bret Baier show, and he talked about the phase 2 of the State Department. Yeah, we talked about 2 weeks ago, story was broke, and we covered it here on TowerGate, that we learned that the State Department has now been drug into this whole dossier thing, and that they may have had a major role to play in this. We learned about a week and a half or so ago that John Kerry was briefed on the dossier. John Kerry was briefed on the dossier, and we learned that about a week and a half or so ago. We also know that Hillary Clinton was the head of the State Department. And it's likely that when she left to run for president, that she certainly had a lot of loyal allies left behind at the State Department who were there to assist her, and probably there was some collaboration, some back channels, some things like that were being worked through to get their support. We also know that Susan Rice and Samantha Power, who did hundreds of unmaskings, are essentially part of the State Department. They fall under the State Department, and they would have been close associates of the rotten Reverend Clinton, and certainly would have been confidants and intermediaries for Clinton between herself and the State Department after she had left the State Department. So yes, there is definitely connections to the State Department, to the dossier, to the Russian investigation, and the whole 9 yards, and that's all going to be aired out. We know that Samantha Power said that a lot of the unmaskings that were in her name that she didn't actually do. I imagine they want to get the answer to the question of exactly who used Samantha Power's name and authority to do those FISA surveillance warrants if she didn't, if she's telling the truth. Somebody did, and you got to be somebody within the administration to do that. It wasn't some low-level hack. It had to be either Ben Rhodes or Lynch or somebody, and they need to find that out. Charles Grassley, is now talking about the fact that his Judiciary Committee will be putting out their own memo on the dossier probably this coming week. So it will be, again, another reason why we'll have a big week. Another memo is coming out, and there'll be many more. Mr. Goodlatte is also working on his own memo, and there will be multiple memos from all three of these committees. And of course, the Oversight Committee, Trey Gowdy heads, will be putting out their own reports based on a lot of these memos. And of course, we have the IG report coming in March. Now, Grassley, as I understand, has to go through the same process. They have to go through this process of having a vote, making sure there's nothing in here that compromises intelligence. And so we don't know when that release will be, but we do know that Grassley is expecting and talking about the fact that he should be releasing some sort of a memo of his own in this upcoming week, if in fact it has gone through the process and is complete by the end of the week. Here's something that just popped up on the radar screen that a lot of us didn't know, that apparently after Trump had fired the dishonorable James Comey, he was looking for a new FBI director. He interviewed quite a few different people. One of the people who was brought to him to interview was Uncle Bob Mueller. And the person who hand-walked him in to vouch for him, Rod Rodenstein. Rodenstein brought Mueller in to have him interviewed and told Trump, yeah, you ought to interview Mueller. He was formerly the FBI director. He's the man. He's the guy you ought to go with. Here he is. Mueller walks in, does his interview. Trump doesn't like what he hears from Mueller and decides he's not the choice. The very next day, Mueller is appointed by Rodenstein to be the special counsel. The day after, he's rejected to be the FBI director. He's appointed as a special counsel by Rodenstein, who was pushing for him. Now that Mueller knows, here's dangerous territory, and why this is dangerous territory for Mueller. If Mueller continues his investigation from this point forward, knowing what he knows now because of what was made public in the memo, if he continues now from this point forward, he's doing so with the full knowledge that the entire Russia story was a fraud. If he continues down this road, knowing what he knows now, he will be pursuing an investigation based on fraudulent documents that were given to the FISA court and other courts to get surveillance. Mueller will know that the investigation from this point forward was based on lies. If he continues, he's now putting himself in very deep legal jeopardy, and he's already in legal jeopardy. Now, he probably knew all this before. The idea that Mueller didn't know all this, he's been investigating this for a long time. You think he didn't know all of this that we're learning that's in the memo? He knew every bit of it, but continued the investigation. The witch hunt, because that's why he was brought in. Some people are saying he's close to an indictment on Trump. We'll see. But this is a very dangerous time for Mueller, because, when you go for the king, you better get him. If he swings for Trump and misses, and we all, of course, will know at that point that he continued to do this investigation after he knew the reason the investigation was launched was based on fraud, he will himself be in the crosshairs for criminal prosecution. I'm sure he's thinking about that. So now that we have reached this point, we have some questions. I have some questions that just popped in my mind. We need to know now from the rotten Reverend Clinton. Has anybody noticed that she hasn't been tweeting out anything? Bill hasn't been doing any speeches. The Clintons are laying very, very low. They're making sure that they're nowhere near anyone who could ask them some questions about the memo. They haven't commented on it. They have nothing to say about it. They're in hiding. I don't blame them. It's probably on the advice of their lawyers. So what did Hillary know? Did Hillary know that Nellie Orr was feeding info to her husband? Then that intel was being fed to FBI counterintelligence. Remember, Hillary Clinton is essentially paying Nellie Orr. She's paying for everything. Everybody that's being paid in this scam, the money is originating from the rotten Reverend Clinton campaign. Did the rotten Reverend Clinton coordinate with Cody Shearer to write this first dossier, his dossier? And did she know of or direct Shearer to give it to Christopher Steele? Did the rotten Reverend interact in any way with the DOJ or the FBI on the Trump-Russia information, the dossier, or anything else? Was the rotten Reverend involved at all with any of these agencies involved in the investigation? Did the rotten Reverend Clinton or campaign officials ever talk to the Orrs, Peter Ben Strokinus, Evelyn Farkanis, Loretta Lynch? Well, we know Loretta Lynch. Clinton met with her on the tarmac. Ben Rhodes, Barack Obama, Christopher Steele, Cody Shearer, Mr. Blumenthal, Sidney Simpson, or his wife Jacoby, Sally Yates. Did she communicate with any of them people, anything having to do with the dossier, the intel reports, or the Russia investigation? At any time during the campaign, before the campaign, during the campaign, or after the campaign? These are questions that the rotten Reverend Clinton are going to be asked. She's going to be asked these questions in front of a grand jury when she's sitting there in the witness stand. That may be 2 or 3 years down the road, but it's going to happen. And she'll say, I can't remember. I just can't recall. I've got amnesia. Oh, and I'm sick. She's going to face these questions in front of a grand jury. She'll be sitting on the witness stand. And of course, we know about the letter. That's why Grassley sent the letter last week, because he knows that this is going to go on for a while, and he knows the game she's going to play with it, having selective amnesia and medical issues. And so Grassley sent the letter last week and only gave 2 weeks for all these people to respond. The rotten Reverend Clinton is not going to get off the hook that easy. They're going to get to her soon and get her on record. She doesn't want to go on record about anything right now, but they're going to get her on record. Believe me. And if they appoint a special counsel, whether it's this week, next week, the week after, whether it's this memo, the next memo, or the next memo, eventually it's got to happen, and she'll be one of the very first people that get a full, real interrogation and a real deposition that will be recorded. Well, we all watched the Democratic media meltdown, and it continues, and it will continue throughout the week. And from this point forward, and it will only get more and more crazy. We have many lies being told by liberal pundits. That's okay, because they'll all get washed away when the grand jury is seated and the witnesses go testify under oath with a prosecutor who's looking to grill them and get the truth. Don't worry about the lies. They'll be washed away. We have some crazy fools, Mr. Dowd appearing on MSNBC and others, calling for revolution, for people to hit the streets, that Trump is a dictator. This is the scorched earth policy. It is the Democrats saying, man, if the truth comes out about everything that happened and the role that the DNC and the Right Reverend Clinton played, and the high-level Democratic operatives in the various Obama administration agencies. If this all comes out, our party is gone. We are destroyed. There will be, the Democratic Party will have to be completely destroyed and started from the ground up, completely remade anew. They know that. They know, not to mention it's the devastating consequences of them winning any elections anytime soon. If all of this comes out, the truth will put a lot of these people in jail and destroy that party. That's why they're freaked out. And so to them, it's the end of the world. So I guess the way they look at it, scorched earth. If we're going to lose everything, we're going to make everyone lose everything with us. We're going to burn the whole fucking thing down. That's what you're looking at. It's not going to work. Not going to work. Dick Morris is now the second person besides myself. I'm the only one I know that's out there. Maybe if there's someone else, tell me. But I'm the only one that's out there that's been saying for weeks and weeks, actually months now, that I don't believe that Christopher Steele was the guy who put together the dossier. I believe he had a role in the dossier. I've explained what that is. But I don't believe he was the author or the guy who compiled everything. Now we have Dick Morris, who's written an opposition, he's written an op-ed piece. I think it was in the Washington Post or somewhere, but he wrote a piece that was just put, I think it was in the Washington Post. You can probably find it on his website or Google it or whatever. But he is now making the same claim I've been making for weeks and months, that Christopher Steele probably did not write the dossier. He has actually jumped on this idea with Cody Shearer. We know he did write a dossier, a different dossier, or maybe it was the same. He's also suggesting that Blumenthal would have been the in-between guy between Shearer and Blumenthal. Of course, both of these guys go way back. Shearer was a hatchet man for the Clintons a long time ago, as was Blumenthal. That's what they both do for the Clintons. So, but the thing is, he is going one step farther than me. He is suggesting that Clinton actually wrote it, or this group of inner circle of Clintons actually wrote it. I wouldn't go quite that far. I think they certainly had major impact. We're driving it, we're directing it, but I think it probably, the actual storyline, probably written by Jacoby, Simpson, and Nellie Orr, and everyone else putting their adding touch to it. So that's what we have for today. I will be back tomorrow with more follow-up. We are out of time. We're going to talk about the importance of Christopher Steele from this point forward, based on what has happened to this point. Thank you for tuning in. You guys enjoy your evening. Happy Sunday. Take care. See you. Bye.